Good evening. Thank you guys for coming. Yes, again, my name is Guadalupe Delgado. I work for the County Office of Education for a specific program. The name is up there. It's called Sacramento CalSOAP. CalSOAP is a college advising program. So we do college advising, but our area of expertise, of course, is financial aid. So I do these quite a bit. I did a couple last week. And tomorrow we train a group of about 200 volunteers who are going to be out helping us doing Cash for College workshops. So yeah, this is what I do. Today we're going to be talking about financial aid, how to get it, what is it, how do you apply, everything you ever wanted to know and probably more. I will try to kind of speedy it up so that we give you an opportunity to ask questions at the end. So these are some of the things that we're going to cover today. What financial aid is, the types of aid available that students can apply for. I mentioned Cash for College, so I'll give you some information about Cash for College workshops happening throughout Sacramento County. And then, like I said, I'll definitely try to leave some time for question and discussions. If we don't have enough time, I will stick around. I'll definitely make myself available outside. I have cards so that if you would like to email me your question instead, if we don't have the time, I'd be glad to answer your emails. So what's financial aid? It's, of course, a way to pay for college. Financial aid can come from all various places. It can come, obviously, from our government. There is some financial aid that comes directly from our federal government. There's some financial aid that comes from our state government. Here in our state, the majority of financial aid that a student receives is from the state. And I'll talk about that in a little bit as well. The money can also come from the institution, or in other words, the college or universities themselves. One of the things I tell our seniors is that they need to shop around for colleges. There are some colleges and universities who are more generous than others. And so it's important that a student applies to several colleges so that they can compare, because some are going to be more generous than others. And of course, some money, usually the money that comes from scholarships, can come from private institutions, private entities. And we'll cover a little bit of all of it. It all starts with the famous FAFSA. This is what it looks like now online. The FAFSA stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid, keyword free. There are some services that will help you fill out a FAFSA for a fee. And really, you don't need to pay anyone for assistance with your FAFSA. First of all, it has really, really private information, and really no one should be helping you with it. The other part is it's a free application. And then finally, I promise, it's not as intimidating as it looks. The FAFSA has gotten better over the years and easier. So please don't feel like you have to pay anyone to do it. So seniors this year will start applying for using the FAFSA beginning October 1st. The deadline continues to be March 2nd. The March 2nd deadline is the state deadline. That is what our state has set so that students get priority and students can access both state and federal aid. The FAFSA itself doesn't have a deadline. And as you can see, the students must fill out their FAFSA or renew their FAFSA every year. The more you learn about the process this year, the easier it'll be next year when you have to do it on your own. And I always like to make a point to parents that the FAFSA is the student's responsibility. It is a student application. They do need our assistance at some point during the FAFSA to submit paperwork, to help them with the parent portion of the FAFSA, but ultimately is the student's responsibility. I see a lot of parents, including me, who want to help our students and we want to do it for them, but we need to make sure that our students know how to do the FAFSA on their own. So parent information is usually required. I could talk a whole hour about who's included in the FAFSA. All I'm going to tell you right now that for FAFSA purposes, a student is considered dependent until the age of 24. So until the student is 24 or receives a bachelor's, the student will be asking you, the parent, for parent information. Parent information should be included in the FAFSA until the student is 24. That's the rule for the FAFSA. Because the FAFSA now is open earlier, it opens October 1st. For those of you that have done it before, maybe with your older children or your own FAFSA, you remember that we used to estimate until we filled out our taxes, right, in April or whatever. That is no longer needed. So for you students, for you seniors, you are going to be using 2016 taxes, the ones that are completed, done, filed. We are using those taxes, and that's it. There's no estimated. That is the final FAFSA. I have 2 college students, a freshman and a sophomore, and because of what I do, I have this rule at home that I refuse to help anybody else with their FAFSA until I do my own children's. So we literally do it October 1st, like at 6 in the morning, because I will be working October 1st doing FAFSAs. And we'll be using 2016. Once it's done, I don't have to look back. Okay, it's done. This is fairly new for those of you that have like older students as well, and for those of you that is brand new. This is a brand new process to the Federal Student Aid ID, or what we call the FSA ID. That is used as your electronic signature for a FAFSA. It is your electronic signature. The student needs an FSA ID. The parent needs an FSA ID. You may do this today, tonight, tomorrow morning. You may go online and request your FSA ID today. If parents, you have multiple kids, parent only needs one FSA ID for all of their kids. You use the same one. Remember I said I had 2 kids? I use the same one. I requested it last year. It's my same FSA ID this year. It is my electronic signature. Now the student needs to get their own. Once you have your FSA ID, then you can log into the FAFSA, enter the information on the FAFSA. At the end, you'll be asked to sign your FAFSA. And remember, student signs it, and if your student is under 24, does not have a bachelor's degree, is not a veteran of war, there's certain things that it'll ask you. Most likely for common, regular, old-fashioned seniors in high school, they are going to be considered dependent until 24. Most students are going to fill out a FAFSA. There are students who may not have a valid social security number. Those students here in California use the California DREAM Act application. The DREAM Act application was modeled after the FAFSA, so a lot of the things I've said about the FAFSA are true with the DREAM Act, the whole thing about being a dependent until 24. So undocumented students are able to fill out a DREAM Act only if they meet certain requirements. Here in California, counselors know we call those AB 540 requirements. Students, you guys can look up what an AB 540 student is. I may have it later on at the end. If they meet those requirements, they're considered California residents and are able to apply for only California aid. Undocumented students obviously are not eligible for federal aid. But what I tell our DREAM Act students, not to worry, because the federal aid is minimal. Most of the financial aid, I think I mentioned before, comes from Cal Grants, which comes from the state. If a student is DACA, whether DACA goes away or not, if you have a DACA social security number, you are still going to use the DREAM Act application. DACA students are not eligible for federal aid, and DACA students only apply using the DREAM Act. The FAFSA or DREAM Act calculates financial aid eligibility, or what we call in the business, the EFC, the expected family contribution. So when you do the FAFSA itself is not going to tell you how much money you're getting. I get a lot of seniors coming to tell me, we did a FAFSA, or parents, I never got an amount. No one told me how much money I'm getting. I haven't heard anything from the FAFSA. Because the FAFSA is a processing form. It does not tell you how much money you're getting. What the FAFSA does, it gives you a number that, based on what you report on your FAFSA, it considers what the family's estimated contribution will be for that year. It's called an EFC. That EFC, or that estimated contribution, is provided to all of the schools that the student would like to apply to. Students, you may report up to 10 colleges on your FAFSA. Okay, up to 10 colleges on your FAFSA. All of those 10 colleges will receive your EFC, and I'll explain more about the EFC, so don't worry. How many colleges can you report? 10. Excellent. What if I have more than that? You first allow the FAFSA people to send your EFC to those first 10, then you can go back into the FAFSA, delete some of them, and add more. The colleges themselves are the ones who are going to actually tell the student how much financial aid you're getting. Here is the secret to financial aid. The EFC is subtracted from the college's cost of attendance, the COA, to equal how much money you're getting. So when I do workshops for seniors, I tell them to write this equation down. COA minus EFC equals the amount of money you are going to get. So I have students write that equation, and we're going to talk about each of those things right now. Let's talk about COA. COA stands for cost of attendance. I tell seniors that if I had, which by the way, I could talk about financial aid for 5 hours, I think. If I had more time, I'd give them homework, tell them to go home and look up all of those colleges that they're interested in and check out or research what is the cost of attending that college per year. So if today we went online and researched the cost of attending UC Davis for a year, does anyone know how much that is this year? Guesses? $34,000 and change a year. Sac State, anybody guesses? It's 25 a year. Okay, here's a good one. What's the cost of attending Folsom Lake College in a year? $1,600. It's actually like $15,000. Why? Why are these costs of attendance so high? Well, look what it says up there. The reason the cost of attendance numbers are so high and elevated is because when you report a school on your FAFSA, the government is considering the entire cost of attending that university or college for an entire year. They are including or estimating in that amount everything from, of course, tuition and fees, but they also are including housing, food, books, transportation, personal expenses. I tell students they are estimating everything you would need to survive for a year. I tell students they're even considering the shampoo you use, the deodorant, I hope they use deodorant, the deodorant they use, everything a student would need to survive for a year. Now that you know that, does it really cost $25,000 to go to Sac State? My 2 kids are going to Sac State, so yeah, it doesn't. Does it really cost $15,000 to go to Folsom Lake? And even as expensive as UC Davis is, it doesn't cost $33,000. So when I tell students to look at this list, tell me what are the non-negotiables. What are the things that I don't have control over, that I could beg them, but they're not going to change their mind? That's it. Tuition and fees, right? Housing can or cannot be non-negotiable, but even housing can be negotiable. Tell me quickly, what is a way that I could save on my housing expenses? Stay home, I love that answer. I'm a mom. Stay home, I love that answer, but really, what else? What could be another answer? I always laugh when a student says, I can get a roommate. And I told them when I went away to school, when the people that had one roommate were the people that were really well off. Wow, one roommate, just you 2 for a whole apartment? Most of us had 4 or 5 roommates. My colleague has a daughter at San Jose State, lives in a house with 9 other girls. It's the only way you can afford rent in San Jose. So as parents, don't you always laugh when kids say, can't wait to leave and be independent? That is the least independent they'll ever be, right? But we'll let them think that. Okay, so does that make sense? When you say cost of attendance, they are including all of these things. So yes, we teach students, and it is, as a parent, help me help your students understand what is the cost of attendance, how they can save money. My son, I gave him $300 for books for the semester. He spent $20. Did I get my money back, by the way? How are ways that he was able to save so much on books? Real quick. Rent them, borrow them, buy used books. His sister had some of them. Does that make sense? So there are ways that we can negotiate some of the expenses, right? Tuition and fees, we can negotiate. So far, so good? Okay, let's move on to EFC. It is the estimated family contribution that the government or the FAFSA people calculate that you can reasonably afford. It's the amount that the FAFSA believes a family can reasonably contribute out of their own pocket for that year. We may not agree. I certainly didn't agree with my EFC, but it is what they believe you can contribute for that year. And guess what? You will know what that EFC is as soon as you press submit on the FAFSA. As soon as you press submit, you get a confirmation page. Thank you so much for submitting the 2018-2019 FAFSA. That's the one you're doing, by the way. It'll say somewhere in that confirmation page, your EFC is, and it literally is abbreviated that way. So folks that haven't been as lucky to attend my workshop will not know what that means, and it'll go over their head. You will now understand that that means that is what the government expects for me and my family together, and my student, to contribute. How do they come up with that number? It's based on what you report on the FAFSA. It's based on your earnings, your assets, your amount of, that's on the negative side. On the positive, the amount of people in your home. It also matters if you have 2 or more people in college. Boy, that helped me when my son went away to college. So if you have more than 1 child in college, there's a lot of things that they're going to ask you. Do you pay child support? Do you get child support back? There's quite a bit of questions that you will be asked. And based on your answers to that, they will determine what your estimated contribution for that year will be. Now, what if I have a contribution? A lot of students see that number, or families, and they get intimidated. They think, wow, does that mean that I have to pay that much money a year? Don't read the EFC as that. Simply know that whatever the amount of that estimated family contribution was, that is the amount your student is not getting on financial aid. Because they assume you and your family either have it or can come up with it in a year. Does that make sense? So when I was in college, my parents were extremely low income, so my EFC was 0. Is that a good thing or a bad? So how much did my parents have to put up for money? None, zip, nada, right? My EFC is not 0 anymore. Far from it. So yes, the lower the EFC, the better, right? But I also tell students that just from experience, from going through the process with so many students, I know that an EFC of $5,000 or less is still reason to celebrate. If your EFC is $5,000, you're still going to get pretty much a lot of financial aid, and you probably can still comfortably attend college and be okay, without having to really have a financial struggle. It is when your EFC becomes 10,000, 15,000, then you can cry, and I will come and cry with you. Does that make sense so far? And if it doesn't, this should help. This is an example. This is a way for you to figure out how they use the equation COA minus EFC equals the money you get. So for example, we know what the COA stands for, right? Cost of attendance. I used American River College, Sac State, UC Davis, and Stanford as examples. By the way, Stanford is more now than 66. I think it's close to 80. But we'll pretend it's 66. So the cost of attending American River is $12,860 a year. My example, the family that I use as an example, had a very low EFC of only $1,000 a year. So if that student decided to go to ARC, how much money in financial aid were they going to receive? $11,800. Sac State, if the student, same student, decided or wanted to go to Sacramento State, it's over 24. The EFC is 1,000. How much money are they going to get for Sac State? 23. You guys get it, right? What is important for the students here to understand, the EFC does not change. The EFC does not change regardless of the college or university your student is attending. So if a student or a family has a 0 EFC, does it matter where the student ultimately attends? There are families here, and you certainly don't have to say anything, who you are low income, that you are or middle income or less, and that you are most likely going to be eligible. it won't matter where your student goes. So this idea of you should go to a community college because it'll be cheaper, it only works for families like mine where we have to pay for it, right? So please encourage your students to go dream big, go whatever university they want to, because financial aid will adjust itself. Now, if your EFC is $10,000, you can sort of do the math, okay? So did that help understanding how it works? Yes or no? Because we're about to move on. Questions about the process, because we're about to talk about the types of aid you're applying to. Okay? So with the FAFSA, by the way, it's one app. That's all you have to do. Students do not have to do multiple applications. It's one app. The only other application that exists that may be an option is for a student who wants to apply for private schools. And that application is part of the Common App, and you could do the CSS profile. But it is an additional financial document, and it's only used for private schools. So like schools like Stanford and UOP and all those schools may ask you for an additional financial document. The CSS financial profile is a lot more intricate than the FAFSA. The FAFSA does not use things like equity and retirement, but the CSS financial aid profile does. So if your student is applying to a very prestigious private school, you'll be asked for more detail than the FAFSA does. For the majority of us, it's just the FAFSA. So with the FAFSA, you are applying for all different types of aid. I tell students, if you are visual, imagine pots of money in front of me. The first pot will be grants. How come we like grants the best? We don't pay those back. So yes, the grants can come from all over the place. They can come from the government, state, federal, institutional, the universities themselves, or they can come from special programs, or I told you before, private entities. Let's talk about federal grants. I mentioned earlier, and I don't know if you remember me saying that the money from the federal government is minimal. This is the max. That is the max amount that the federal government could allot a student. 5,000, what is it now, 815, that is the max. That is their largest grant. It's called a Pell Grant. So that comes directly from the federal government. Pell Grant eligibility shows up on the FAFSA confirmation page, and students see that, and they're like, that's all I'm getting. I'm just getting $5,000. It's just one of the grants, and it shows up on the confirmation page. There's another smaller grant, FCUSD. It could award up to $4,000. I've never seen anybody get $4,000. I was a zero EFC student, and I think I got $400 from an FCUSD. And then Project Teach. So notice how I went over those really quick, and I want to talk about the big ones, Cal Grants. So Cal Grants and the California middle class. Again, this is money that our state gives our state students to stay in state schools. If you are awarded a Cal Grant, you may not take the Cal Grant out of state. Super important. If your student is awarded a Cal Grant, and I'll show you how to find that out pretty early, by all means, you're missing out on big money by sending them away, okay? So in order to be considered for a Cal Grant, our state requires, one, that the student do the FAFSA. The FAFSA information goes straight to CSAC, the California Student Commission. And they need a second form, and I'll say it like this kind of form, because really it's not a form. It is the high school that your student attends must verify, one, the GPA of our student, two, that they've eventually completed high school before they can get awarded a Cal Grant. And yes, Cal Grants are tied to your GPA. I work here at Cordova. I don't work here, but I work with Cordova High School, so I know that Cordova High School will submit electronically GPAs for all of their students. The state is trying to create a new law that says that high schools must submit GPAs to CSAC by October of the senior year. So right now, I think they do it in December, January, but CSAC is trying to get that GPA submission early to award your students earlier. So here it is. The A, the B, or the C. In high school, I got a B. The A is for those families who are higher income, maybe middle class, and if a family makes up to $90,000, the student has to have a 3.0 or above, and the A pays full tuition at a CSU and UC. The student does not see any money. The money goes directly from CSAC over to the university. Your student is attending, and it pays their full tuition at a CSU or a UC. At a private school, it only pays a small portion of it. The B is for low-income families that earn under $90,000. And the B, the student not only gets the full tuition paid at a CSU and a UC, but the B students also get a small stipend of $1,672 a year so that they can use that towards their books or that parking permit. The C is for students attending vocational schools. Okay? Questions about the Cal Grants? You don't, obviously, I think you figured it out. You don't get to decide which one you're getting. They assign you, right? The middle class scholarship. This is, I think, the third or fourth year, so this is fairly new, so families might not be aware. I don't know why it's called a scholarship. It should be called the middle class grant. It also comes from CSAC, from our state. It just came up because there were many families who made over $90,000 that didn't qualify for any financial aid or substantial amount. So the middle class grant or scholarship is for families that make up to this year. Last year, I think it was $156,000. I think it's going up to $165,000. So if you make less than that, your family or your student can qualify for a middle class scholarship. The middle class will pay only between 10% and 40% of tuition at a CSU and UC. So it's partial payment of tuition at a CSU and UC. My kiddos get a middle class. Questions about that? Yes?
On the Cal Grant, you were saying it pays the whole tuition, but it doesn't. It only pays that $5,700, and then the rest family pays.
Okay, gotcha. What she's talking about, it pays tuition. Each university has fees that they give. So no, Cal Grant does not pay the building of the parking lot and Sac State's building of the well, right? I'm paying for that. That's, I think, right now, this year at Sac State, it's an additional $1,000 that we had to pay. It still pays full tuition at a CSU and UC. If the university that your student is going has their own fees, then that's not covered by Pell Grant. Thank you. Institutional grants. So there are universities that have their own money. CSUs have their own money, UCs have their own money. And in addition to the Pell Grant from the federal government, Cal Grants from the state government, the university could also give their own money. At CSUs, it's called the state grant. At UCs, it's called the blue and gold. Work study. Work study is a federal grant, and it is a grant. By the way, seniors, when you apply for the FAFSA, you are asked, are you interested in work study? And all of you should say, if you are awarded work study, it is an amount of money that you can work on a campus job or somewhere that's affiliated with a campus. And you're thinking, well, that doesn't sound like a grant. Well, the benefits of having a work-study job are lots. One is the jobs, for the most part, are not taxed because it's their grant, their work. When it comes to tax time, they don't claim that as income because it was their grant. And most students can work both jobs. My son is working both jobs. He's working a work-study job, and then he's working his own job because the work-study job literally is 8 hours a week. Please don't sort of go, work study. It actually is a pretty good deal. Student loans. When we talk about government student loans, first of all, they're federal. Second, there are no more banks involved. I remember getting a student loan when I was young, and I had a bank that was sort of like my lender. Now they're called direct student loans. Many years ago, they became direct. So the student is borrowing directly from the federal government, and eventually they will be paying the federal government directly any money that they borrow to attend school. If you are borrowing money for your child or student to go to college, please Don't do that. Consider the student loan. Interests are super low. The student will not make a payment until they are not attending school. And then even when they stop attending school, they give them 6 months of grace period for them to sort of get their act together, find a job before they start making a payment. If I went around to all the teachers, counselors I know, all of us have borrowed. We paid it off, we survived, we didn't go into bankrupt, nothing bad happened. I eventually bought a house and it was fine. Both of my kids are borrowing. I'd rather parents do that than borrowing from their 401k or borrowing or selling something. A student loan is nothing to be that, scared about. I would much rather the student borrow than the PLUS loan. PLUS loan is also a government issued loan. However, the PLUS loan needs to be paid back ASAP. The PLUS loan is used against your credit. Student loans are not. The PLUS loan is used they actually check your credit, it's used against you, and you make payments right away. So if your student is considering a school that requires you to borrow and dig into the PLUS loan, please put that into consideration. Unless you have the money, and it's your money that you're using to pay for it, please reconsider taking out a PLUS. Now the student loan, the max they could borrow is $5,500 a year anyways, so it's not like they're borrowing $20,000 a year. Right now the average student debt for a 4-year education is $20,000. And that's like everyone I know. Everyone I know who is going to college. The Perkins has a higher interest, but the Perkins has a 9-month grace period. Okay, just so if you wondered what the deal with that is. Subsidized is the good loan. I mean, they're both good loans. I honestly am supportive of both. The subsidized, when the student picks up the money and uses it, the interest begins accruing, of course. However, the government is paying all the interest on the loan until the student stops going to school and after the 6 months grace period. So if they borrowed $5,500, the day the repayment begins, they still only owe $5,500. The unsubsidized means the minute they pay, the interest starts accruing. One of my kids has an unsubsidized, so we are paying the interest right now. So she doesn't, it doesn't get out of control. And it's like $50 a month. Oh, got it. Oh, very good question. He says, if the student borrows, is the parent signing something? And nope. My daughter borrowed the money. My daughter and I had nothing to do with it. They don't have my name or my social or anything. It's her loan, her payment back. Of course, dad is paying for it when they get it. But that's another story, right? Okay, so let's talk about really quick scholarships. All I can say about scholarship is that if you have not started applying for scholarship, students, you're late. You should have started yesterday, as in when you were in 8th grade. You need to have been applying for scholarships constantly, especially if you have big concerns about loans. I always laugh when families have this big issue with loans. I'm like, well, how much work have you been doing to get scholarships, right? Because that can substitute a loan. Yes, there is a lot of competition for scholarships. So the only really quick advice I can give you about applying for scholarships is focus on small local scholarships or a scholarship that kind of has a tie to the student or you. If they are applying for the big ones, for these, listen, I am so happy when someone tells me they got the Coke or the GMSP. I am elated for the student. But what are the odds of that, right? So what is more feasible is when students are able to get a small scholarship. Your district has small scholarships. My own kids got small scholarships, $300 there, $100 there. And yes, when they first applied, they're like, it's too much work for this amount of money. But now they're glad they have that money. I got a scholarship because my parents worked and they were in a union. So my parents' union had a scholarship. I applied for that as being. So I had my own children go through our life. We're Golden One members. Guess what? Golden One has a scholarship. Or for example, if I was searching for scholarships for myself, I would literally Google scholarships for Latina women living in Sacramento. If there's only 2 hits I get, well, then I'll apply to those 2. Because if you put scholarships, you'll get 1 billion responses and you're going to get really overwhelmed. Does that make sense? So the award notice. How many schools could we put on our FAFSA? So all those 10 schools who received your FAFSA are going to be sending your students award notices. Now those award notices come in electronically. Sometimes they're given to them in a special email, but for the most part, colleges are lazy and they post it on your student's portal. When your student applies for college, they'll end up having their own portal. And the award notices are usually posted there sometime in, well, if the deadline is March 2nd, you could probably not expect it anytime before that. April, May, okay? Now, the student could get 3, 4, 10 award notices that says, if you're coming to Sonoma State, this is what we are prepared to offer you. So this is a sample one, very typical, and I said Sonoma because this is for Sonoma State. So the award notice, and you all should know all this lingo by now, right? It says the COA, which, what was the COA? Cost of attendance. This family's EFC is how much? So that means this student has a particular need of $20,000, right, to attend that school. Sonoma State is prepared to offer the student a Cal Grant, a subsidized Pell Grant, a subsidized loan, an unsubsidized loan. We know the difference now. And they're also prepared to offer them work study. When you total it, guess how much it is? This is very typical. So if you expected your student to get the money from one source, that's not the way it works. They're going to get it from various sources. Now remember, I said at the beginning, it's important to shop around for colleges and universities. This is because they are not all going to look like that. There are some colleges and universities who are a lot more generous and dig into their own pockets, and there's some that are not. So this is where we get to compare and what is a school that offers money. Does that make sense? Okay, so I want you guys to be kind of on the lookout for that. Okay, so everyone, take note. October 19th is Cordova High School's Cash for College. This is the only Cash for College I believe we do in your district. But because it's the only one, we hold two. We do one at the beginning of the season, October 19th, and we will definitely have one in February for those late applicants. What is a Cash for College workshop? It is where people like me, and I do come to Cordova High Schools every year, people like me, experts in financial aid, volunteers, come and help families fill out the FAFSA. It is not a talking workshop like this. You come, you sit in a computer, and please come prepared. There are several. You don't have to come to Cordova's. cashforcollege.org. You go into the website, put your zip code, and you'll find other local Cash for College workshops. I was talking to the Folsom Lake representative. They are having their own workshop as well over at Folsom Lake. So if you want to go to that one, you're welcome to. Anywhere that you can get one-on-one help with filling out your FAFSA. But if you want me to help you, I will be here on October 19th on my wedding anniversary. Here is my contact info. I mentioned that CalSOAP is a program. It is a college advising program. We do college admissions as well. But as you can see, financial aid is what we really are strong in. There is my email. You could also follow us on social media. The Facebook page is where I normally post scholarships, and I stay faithful to sort of the quirky local scholarships. So if you are interested in making sure that you are up to date with scholarships, you can follow us on Facebook. As a parent, I can tell you one of the biggest things I did when my children were in high school and I was doing this process is I also followed on Facebook. I followed on Facebook universities, I followed scholarship sites, and I learned a lot because they would come through my feed. If your student is applying to a UC, the UC Berkeley admissions, undergraduate admissions, is a great page to follow because they keep you up to date with everything. So I used it a lot for my students, and I use it a lot for my children. So that may be a little good tip because I get sort of stuff on my newsfeed, especially scholarships. That's really helpful. Okay, a few last minute questions. Any questions?
For the middle class scholarship, is it automatic because the high schools are sending in the transcript, or do we have to fill out?
Very good question. She asked about the middle class scholarship. No, there is no additional form. That you only do the FAFSA again. Remember, the schools now, it's the law for schools to submit electronically the GPAs. So they will match it. So if a student is not eligible for the Cal Grant, they don't meet the income, then they'll move them up to the middle class. The only bad thing about the middle class is right now, my kids started school in August, they haven't even gotten it. The middle class always comes later. Cal Grant comes like a week before school starts.
Do we need to renew the FAFSA every year?
Good question, yes. Students will be renewing the FAFSA every year. Why? Because family circumstances change every year. One year I'm married, the other year I'm not. This year I had 3 kids, now I have another one. Now for example, I had 1 year, one in college, and the year I had to, so this year my husband was working, this one is not. So if your family situation stayed consistent, your EFC will stay consistent. But if there's major changes, then it will change. So yes, every year students renew it same time, October 1st to March 2nd. Yes, on the Cash for College flyer, you guys are going to get a Cash for College flyer at home, or you can go on the website. There's a list of documents that if they relate to you, you should bring to the workshop. First and foremost, copy of your tax return, you can imagine. 2016 tax return. But there's a list of other documents that you should bring. Or at least know in here, like your social security numbers, right? Other questions? Very good question. Yes, tonight was for everyone. Cash for College is strictly for the current seniors, correct. Next year, it'll happen again because this is crunch time. It's application time.
When you apply for the FAFSA, and you certify it at the end, is it just certified by the parent or the parent and student?
Both, the parent and the student. By the way, if there's 2 parents in the household, you only need 1 FSA ID. Like we have a 2-parent household. I'm the holder of the ID. I sign it. My husband, his information is on the FAFSA, but only 1 parent needs to sign it. Good question.
What did you say was the best way to do it?
Be as specific. You know, if you have a junior or a sophomore, scholarships for juniors who live in the city of Folsom. And I literally put the date. Like I would say right now, September 2017, because it gives me those that are due now. One more.
When you have 2 students, income half, is that when you apply, you apply half the income? Or you explain the scenario that you have 2 students?
No, in the FAFSA, there's a question that says how many people will be in college in that particular year. So like 1 year I put 1, the next year I put 2, and yes, my EFC was a certain amount with my daughter. The next year when I did it and I put I'll have 2 in college next year, my EFC was cut in half. But that's all they need to know. Now, if you go back to school, it doesn't count. It's only siblings, only children.
Student loans, and then let that money grow while he goes to school.
She's saying about like if you have a 529, it's in your name and you have to report it. Now, if the grandparent or someone put a 529, if it's in your child's name and it goes with his social security number, then you have to report it on the FAFSA. And whether you use it or not is up to you. You could say use it 30 or whenever. It's going to be up to you, but it will affect the amount of financial aid your student is getting. The money a grandparent is saving is not going to affect your FAFSA because you don't put anything for your grandparent. Your property does not affect the FAFSA. If you have an extra property, it does. If you have a rental, it's going to affect it. Yes?
On middle class, we're asking for the class, the option ABC. So if your assets, your salary is able to 90,000, assets up to 156, you're still eligible for any scholarship?
Yeah, the FAFSA doesn't, to be honest, go up very much. It's pretty clear cut. They don't ask you very much about assets. They ask you for a separate property. They ask you silly things. Do you own a farm? No. They do ask how much you'll have in my savings account. That's about it. It doesn't go very detailed into like CDs and that. It's just really clear cut. Okay? Thank you, guys. You're welcome.
Round of applause for one of the speakers.
One of the best sources of funding for college is the free application for Federal Student Aid, or FAFSA. It is the application used to apply for federal and state student aid programs offered by the U.S. Department of Education. Completing and submitting the FAFSA is easier than ever, and it's free, and it gives access to the largest source of financial aid to help pay for college or career school. Federal and state student aid can cover expenses such as tuition and fees, room and board, books and supplies, transportation, or other related expenses. Students should apply in their senior year and can access the application as early as October 1st. In California, students should complete the application no later than March 2nd, as it is the deadline to qualify for a Cal grant. The Natomas Unified School District offers assistance with completing the FAFSA through a program called Cash for College. This is an annual event held each year at Natomas High School in October or November. Check with Natomas or Intercom High School for exact dates. For the fastest and easiest way to apply, visit the official website at FAFSA.gov. It's available in English and Spanish. Completing the online form has several advantages. The website uses skip logic that skips questions that don't apply to your situation. The schools listed on the FAFSA will receive processed information quickly, and the website allows you to check your status immediately as well as get online help. It takes most people about 30 minutes to complete. In addition to the online form, you have two other options for completing the FAFSA. We recommend that parents and students complete the application together, since in most cases, the income information will be based on the parent or guardian's tax information from 2 years prior. Before beginning the FAFSA, students and parents will each need an FSA ID. An FSA ID is used to confirm your identity when accessing your financial aid information and electronically signing your federal student aid documents. Once a student and parent are issued the FSA ID, they can then gather the information needed to complete the FAFSA, such as Social Security numbers, driver's license numbers, any W-2 forms or records of money earned, and your tax records from the previous 2 years. Don't let entering tax information intimidate you. In most cases, parents can use the IRS data retrieval tool that will automatically fill in the correct tax information directly on the FAFSA. If you are completing a FAFSA online at FAFSA.gov, a Social Security number is also required to apply for a username and password called the FSA ID, which can be used to electronically sign your FAFSA. Most undocumented students are not eligible for a Social Security number. In these circumstances, students can complete the California DREAM Act application to apply for other forms of financial aid. The California DREAM Act application is available at caldreamact.org. For more information on this topic and to determine which form to complete, please visit the address on the screen. The amount of financial aid received is based on the income of the person or persons who currently provide financial support for the student. In most cases, it is the parent or legal guardian. This person will provide income and asset information, family size, and number of children in college on the FAFSA, which will be used to determine an expected family contribution amount, or EFC. The EFC remains the same no matter what school the student attends or the cost of that attendance. For example, if a school costs $20,000 and a student's EFC is $2,000, the student will be offered a financial aid package to cover the remaining cost of $18,000. If the school costs $40,000, the student's EFC still remains at $2,000, and therefore the financial aid package will be $38,000. The more school costs, the higher the amount the financial aid package. When a student receives a financial aid offer, it can include 3 parts: grants, loans, and work study. Grants are free money, which does not need to be paid back. One example is the Cal Grant. This is frequently offered to students attending schools in California. The second part of the package are loans. Loans need to be paid back once the student finishes college and begins working. These loans are usually offered at a very low interest rate and flexible repayment terms. Work study provides an opportunity for students to work on campus and contribute to financing their education. Rather than receiving a paycheck, money earned is directly applied to the student's tuition or other expenses. Financial aid packages will vary from school to school. Therefore, it is very important for students to keep an open mind about expenses, as there is no way of knowing what a financial aid package will include until the student applies. Scholarships and private loans are 2 other sources of aid. There are thousands of scholarships available to students based on a variety of factors. Some are merit-based, some are not. Researching what is available and completing application requirements by deadlines are key to being awarded scholarships. Students who put the time and work into these can yield big returns. One word of caution, however, is to avoid scholarship scams. Students should never have to pay money to receive a scholarship. Check with your school counselor about suspicious offers. Most banks offer private student loans. Check with your local branch for rates and terms. Loans could come from the federal government, your state government, your college or career school, or a private or nonprofit organization. Do your research. Apply for any grants or scholarships you might be eligible for, and be sure to meet the application deadlines. Thank you for taking the time to watch this Parent University video. Please take a moment to help us improve the Parent University website by taking our survey listed below.